So it is my pleasure to introduce Dino Numerato from the Faculty of Social Sciences from the Charles University in Prague. Dino is an associate professor of sociology, and he deals with a variety of very interesting topics like sociology of sport, sociology of medicine, and sociology of migration. His today's presentation is called The Healthcare Citimer. So I will now stop sharing my screen, and now the floor and the screen is yours, Dino.
Okay, thank you very much, Alisa, for your nice presentation, and welcome here to everyone. I'm really glad to be here with you, also, although only at a distance. And thank you very much for inviting me. I think this is my participation after 5 years at this research afternoon at the Department of Sociology at the Faculty of Social Studies. And obviously, it's always very nice to return back to my alma mater. I'm very sorry for not being there in person, but I really hope that there will be some occasion soon. And maybe also the topic of my today's seminar could somehow enhance this closeness, or maybe it can contribute to diminish the distances between Prague and Brno. And why? Because the title of my today's presentation is The Healthcare Citimer. And the term citimer might sound maybe a bit weird. It is a neologism that we first used together with a colleague of mine, Richard Giulianotti, when I was working on a research study focusing on activism of football fans. And we have actually written a paper focusing on the interconnections of consumption and citizenship. And we developed this notion of citimer. Basically, this was a relabel of already existing notions of citimer consumer used in a variety of contexts. And at the end of that paper, we have also suggested that maybe the meaning of the term could be even somehow different to the way how we used it across the paper, because we were focusing on basically the citizenship dimension and on the consumption dimensions of football fans. So we tried to emphasize that fans often act as citizens. Sometimes they are saying we are not consumers, protesting, for instance, against so-called modern football. At the same time, however, they emphasize that they have some consumer rights. So these two identities of a citizen and of a consumer are necessarily connected. And what we argue at the end of that paper is, well, perhaps it's even a bit more complicated here, because the identity of a football fan is not related only to a citizen, not only to consumer, but at the same time also to producer, or referring here to the term first coined by Alvin Toffler and later on critically developed by George Spitzer. We stressed that this notion, this neologism, citimer, is worth of developing, worth of being developed further. And this is what I'm doing now with my research, focusing on civic engagement of patients and citizens. This is basically an outcome of my research, which I have done together with my broad research team as part of the Gachr funding between 2017 and 2019. But understandably enough, I've also collected some additional evidence amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is what I will be referring to. So to give you some taste also about what do I mean with the term of Citimer, we can use this example from the Twitter account of the Czech Ministry of Health. This is today's former minister, Jan Blatný, who at a certain point said, we are proceeding from tomorrow onwards. Persons who have chronic diseases can register themselves for vaccinations. Actually, today I spoke to the representatives of these patients with the Patients' Council and explained them last details. Thank you very much for their inputs and for passing forward the pieces of information towards patients. And why this quote, why this example from the Twitter account of the Ministry of Health? Basically because we can see and understand how these three layers of identities are interconnected and how this reference to patients and Patients' Council, which is an institutionalized council gathering together patients in the Czech Republic. And basically what I do in this research is to label and I'm trying to examine the behavior and actions and discourses of these patients through the lenses of this Citimer concept. Because these patients act as citizens. This group of patients with chronic diseases actually exercise some pressure and lobbying on politicians to include them at the very first stage of the vaccination process. So there is the citizenship dimension. Then there is also consumption dimension, which is a little bit hidden in this specific quote, but as you all know very well, because we have all became sociologists of health and illness in the last weeks and months, patients and citizens are becoming also consumers, trying to make informed choices and trying also to claim their rights, as well as choosing between different products, between different vaccines, between Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, and so on and so forth. And there is also the third dimension, and that's the dimension of production. So at the end of this short tweet, Jan Blatný expresses his thanks to the patients for passing forward the information here. And this is, I think, quite symptomatic of the position of patients in today's contemporary healthcare regimes, because the patients here do not only, and obviously not every citizen, responsibly, I should hear the quotation marks, vaccinate him or herself. But at the same time, what we can observe here is a sort of a double responsibilization, I would even say, because these patients with chronic diseases not only vaccinate themselves, protect themselves and increase the herd immunity, but at the same time, they are also co-producing the healthcare in the Czech Republic and the vaccination system. So basically, they communicate the need for being vaccinated. And you can see that all these identities here can somehow overlap. And I will argue later on that these overlaps and constellations and configurations of different identities can change across different contexts and times. But the key point, the key argument here is that altogether these different identities do create something, someone, who we can call Citimer. And here I'm trying to, as I said, following the paper we have written on football fans and being inspired by the work of Ritzer and by the term prosumer, I'm trying to combine the terms citizens on the one hand and prosumer on the other hand. So prosumer is a term combining, by the way, already combining consumer and producer. But by combining producer and the consumer, the citizenship dimension included in this Citimer concept has been left behind. And I think that it shouldn't be left behind, that it's actually quite important for our understanding of contemporary, I would say, citizenship, but at the same time, presumption as well. So this is an example to start with, and this example can be situated in broad literature on patients and citizens and their relationships towards healthcare developed in last 3 or 4 decades. And in this literature, and I will be quite quick now just to move forward to different empirical examples, patients were defined and represented as first as citizens who express their rights, voices, and who participate in decision-making processes. So very often the notion of a patient as a citizen has been elaborated hand in hand with the focus on health movements as a specific form of social movements, and also hand in hand with, in sociology, especially critical examinations of the public, of the so-called public and patient involvement concept. This idea of a patient as a citizen also includes the participation of patients sometimes in research and knowledge production. So that's patients as citizens. We also have patients as consumers. So consumers who are claiming their access to healthcare. This notion of a consumer has been developed much more strongly in, I would say, Western regimes where healthcare is much strongly related to private healthcare. But I would argue that it's also relevant to use it in the context of neoliberal governance, neoliberal healthcare governance, or the sort of embedded neoliberal healthcare governance that we can observe here in the Czech Republic or in broader Central Eastern European context. So this approach towards patients emphasized ideology of health consumerism, that the healthcare should somehow address patients' demands and needs. And patients are viewed somehow ideologically as well as empowered as individual actors who have responsibilities for their own health decisions. Very often in relation to the neoliberal regimes, this understanding of consumers is also linked to the market rhetoric, marketization, and the market logic, and patients are viewed as consumers also through the perspective of pharmaceutical industry. And then we have patients as citizens, citizen consumers. So this is when these first dimensions of citizen and consumer somehow blur, and when they contribute to the development of hybrid, sometimes contradictory identities, as Judas demonstrated in her work on ethical food consumption. By the way, what I would like to develop here, the argument here is not relevant to the healthcare only, but later on I would like to argue, and we can discuss it further also in relation to your own research, to what extent the concept of a citimer can be relevant for observing different say links between presumption and citizenship in different social spheres. So this doesn't obviously include only healthcare citizens and their approach towards healthcare, but it can also include ethical consumption, and it can include, for instance, football fans, as I mentioned before. So what is at stake here is the fact that patients are viewed as citizen consumers, as citizens who have their own responsibilities. At the same time, although not necessarily at the same time, who can participate in decision-making processes and who can influence policy-making processes. And then there is also the second dimension of consumers. So they are able to make informed choices, informed decisions, and they have their rights, similarly to consumers, for instance. And then there is another conceptualization of patients, viewing them as prosumers, probably most explicitly developed in the work of Deborah Lupton in her ideas focusing on digital health. So here we can see that there are these interrelated processes of production and consumption. And I have some quotes here. The patient of today should be empowered as a prosumer. So the patient of today should make informed choices, but at the same time, he or she should also share his or her knowledge and understandings of healthcare, for instance, online. For instance, by reviewing the quality of healthcare across different healthcare facilities, by sharing ideas about specific medicines. So there are different understandings. And why prosumer? Because patients here do contribute to the production of a surplus, of an economic added value for the industry, or they can also, let's say, weaken the economic burden for national healthcare systems by taking okay, thank you for this note on the remaining time. So yeah, so this is presumption. Patients do contribute to the creation of an economic surplus, and digital technologies do play a very important role here. So the objective here is to explore prosumers as citizens. I would argue that this is a missing link, although there are some implicit notions in the research development of the term prosumer, when he speaks, for instance, about disruptive or transformative prosumer, or there are some notions about ethical consumption. But I would say that a more citizen-centered analysis is needed, and perhaps this focus on citizen-centered analysis also given by my own research project, which was primarily focused on civic engagement of patients and citizens. What I discovered later on, that we cannot understand this civic engagement in political action without really understanding the interconnections of this political action with the production or co-production of healthcare, or with the production or co-production of added value of the healthcare business. So as I anticipated, this is an output of a research project. I should also emphasize here that I had the pleasure to collaborate with a number of researchers at the Charles University, and I should mention mainly Teresa Sedláčková, Petra Hónová, or Anna Černá, who all contributed very substantially to the process of on-site data generation. And this will be also acknowledged in further publications. So what are the outcomes here? What I'm trying to emphasize, and maybe I can try to open some questions for further debate. So as I anticipated, there are these interconnections between citizen and prosumer identities, and we can basically understand that the Citimer, the healthcare Citimer, has been constructed from above. So it's a top-down process, the creation of the Citimer. But it's also a process which goes below, and we can demonstrate this on the discourses employed by Citimers, social practices, as well as institutional links that patients citizens develop. And I would identify the variety of citimership as social actions combining the prosumption and citizenship dimensions, which can be highly compliant in case of a collaborative and let's say neoliberal responsible behavior, or they can also be resistant. And this is why in our research we have also identified 4 different categories of the Citimer endorsers: those who totally endorse the existing healthcare system; extenders, those who help to maintain the healthcare system, for instance, by passing further information and some educational messages. But there are also transformers, those who are trying to change the contemporary healthcare system, and there are critiques, those who engage in highly disruptive, I would say, citizenship activities. So we have Citimers constructed from below. Patients have and claim the same citizen rights as any consumer. Citimers engage in social practices that combine citizenship actions as well as consumption production. And this is a very subtle issue here, which I should probably emphasize here. And it's the fact that the citimership here is embedded in a highly marketized context. And when speaking about healthcare, we shouldn't leave aside not only the role of neoliberal healthcare regimes, but also of the pharmaceutical industry. And if we take into consideration, for instance, the development of healthcare citimership in the Czech Republic, we can see that corresponding to these from below initiatives, there are also some top-down initiatives trying to facilitate and to empower patients, either from the side of the political power or from the side of the pharmaceutical industry, representing actually quite a significant vehicle of patients' organizations in the Czech Republic. So we have patients, and we have a number of patients who are very active and who are trying to make pressure and lobbying on politicians to change law, to change certain laws, to change certain procedures involved in healthcare, and also, for instance, fostering the development of innovations, health technology innovations, including medicines. And in this case, patients, the so-called Citimers, they are very often funded by the pharmaceutical industry in order to present and to act as citizens. And I think this is one of the key points here, which can raise some queries for further debates. So as I tried to say, we have Citimers created from below, Citimers created fostered from above, and on top of this, this has a lot of implications. I prepared a little bit more, and I spoke too much. But to conclude it and to situate this short debate of the Citimer concept here, let me reconnect very quickly to the concept of prosumer developed by Ritzer, and let me explain what would be the conceptual development of this notion when taking into consideration the citizenship dimension. So what I would like to argue here, that not only consumers are put here to work for free in production, but also citizens. And what is important, Ritzer is using this Marxist term exploitation, and he speaks about synergistic double exploitation. In case of citimers, I would speak even about synergistic triple exploitation, when citizens are not exploited only as producers or as consumers, but as well as citizens. For instance, when they act on behalf of the pharmaceutical industry or on behalf of the neoliberal healthcare regimes. What is very interesting here in this case also is the connection and combination of the citizen ethos and needs with the presumption, because what Ritzer very often emphasizes is the fact that the needs that prosumers try and I will stop very soon, sort of make it a bit longer. But basically, the needs that prosumers are trying to address are often developed by the consumer culture or by the economic credit economy. Whereas in case of citimers, this citizen ethos can transform its meanings, and the presumption can transform its meaning. And it can have a higher degree of legitimacy. For instance, by addressing a highly emotionalized and embodied topic related to health and human lives. And the last point I would like to make here, we can observe a move from a compliant or disruptive transformative prosumer to compliant, disruptive, or transformative citimer here. Which basically means that the margins for social transformations and for social change are a bit larger here in case of Citimer, because we can see by introducing the citizenship dimension into the presumption that the outcomes of the presumption, either in terms of its of the reproduction of existing systems or in terms of its change, are somehow extended. And I must end up here. I left some questions, and I should also recognize the funding at this stage. So sorry for making it a little bit longer. But I will be definitely interested in listening your remarks and observations.